Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show is recorded on February 24th, 2022, and is current through the Star Trek Discovery episode, The Great Barrier, so beware of spoilers. And if you are in one of the regions where Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Prodigy have not yet aired and you are trying to stay spoiler-free, be sure to check the episode article on TrekCore for time codes for each of our stories tonight in order to avoid them. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Stephen Van Doren. Stephen, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I love getting the chance to talk Trek with you.
All right, Stephen. Well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
It would be impossible to be a Trekkie and not be excited about what's happening this upcoming Thursday at the beginning of Season 2 of Picard. I mean, come on. What we got to see in the Ready Room just had me so thrilled. You know, it's just, I cannot wait.
Of the short preview that there was featured in the Ready Room today, what would you say was the part that had you most excited?
Well, you know, I apparently had misinterpreted where they were heading previous to this with their little clues throughout all of the teasers thus far. I had assumed that the Stargazer reference was going to be to Picard piloting the Stargazer, not Rios. So that for me is like, whoa, okay, so La Serena is with Seven over in the Outer Reaches being a sort of Texas Ranger of the future. That blew my mind when I saw that. Whoa, okay. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I can't say too much because I might have already seen at least the first episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2, and so I don't want to say anything that will spoil it or will break any embargoes about what's happening in the episodes. All I will say is, buckle up.
I've had buckles all over me for the past several months waiting for this, so I think I'll happily be wrong. And I'll be happily right. So either way, I'm a happy camper. That's kind of where we are in Star Trek, is every time I make an assumption about where the show is going, you know, any of the shows that have been going, I've been both happily proven wrong and proven right, and I've enjoyed it equally both times. So it's lovely. It's like you say, it's a great golden age.
I'll say one more thing. Buckle up, number 1, and 2, I am buzzing, and people can take from that or leave from that whatever they want to. And everyone will watch the Season 2 premiere on Thursday, and I think have a great time. Okay, let me talk about what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, which is Star Trek Prodigy action figures, which we talked about on last week's episode, are now up for pre-order. Slowly starting to roll out for pre-order across a number of different specialty toy websites. Big Bad Toy Store in the US now has them up. They have them up for $1 cheaper than the live action Star Trek action figures that they announced last month. So they have the live action figures up for $17.99. The Prodigy figures are up for $16.99 each. No more certain release date. They listed as Q3, which is around what the press release said about them rolling out in October. And there's no picture for the hologram Janeway figure, though there is a listing, so you can pre-order the hologram Janeway figure. I noticed that they're not yet up for pre-order on Amazon.com. The Big Bad Toy Store has them. I'm going to maybe assume that means that some of the other kind of toy places like Entertainment Earth also have them, and that they'll probably roll out over the rest of the internet over the next couple of weeks, wherever you might want to order your Star Trek Prodigy merchandise from. So yeah, even though these won't ship until later in the year, I've already pre-ordered the whole set that are coming in October, and I couldn't be happier and more thrilled about it, and really looking forward to getting them. those.
I remember last time we talked last July, I admitted that I'm just such a terrible collector, and I've recently considered that more, and I do collect things. They're just not very good things. Like I have, clothes from high school from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I've always admired fans who are able to collect and keep merchandise. I still remember throwing a collection of original Star Wars figures that I had lanyarded together into a long chain. I threw them up into a tree in my front yard and left them there. I think they were there for probably 5 or 10 years before my father finally got them down and, sun-bleached, destroyed things. But if I'd kept them, they'd be worth hundreds of dollars a piece by now. I'm just a terrible collector. I envy everyone who's able to do that.
You got hundreds of dollars worth of value out of them.
Oh, surely, just staring at them in the tree out there going, oh, I wish I could reach that.
All right, well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, following last week's Paramount investor event, at which J.J. Abrams said that the upcoming Matt Shakman-directed Star Trek movie would feature a return of the Kelvin timeline cast, it turns out it wasn't just Star Trek fans for whom that was new information. The Kelvin Timeline Enterprise cast themselves seemed to have learned that the next Star Trek movie was going to feature them the same way we did, in the Hollywood trade press. Yes, according to reporting from The Hollywood Reporter, most, if not all, of the representatives of the major members of the cast, including Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Simon Pegg, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, and John Cho, were not aware that their clients would be featuring in the next Star Trek movie, nor that it would begin filming by the end of this year. So what does that mean for Star Trek's 14th movie? Well, maybe don't count on that return of the Kelvin timeline crew quite yet, because this story makes it clear that deals are not yet in place for the stars to return. And even if they do, Paramount is likely to have to pay a hefty fee now that they've announced to the world that the next Star Trek film will star this cast and given up their negotiating leverage over salaries prior to signing any agreements. And if the cast doesn't know that Paramount hopes they're filming a new Star Trek movie by the fall of this year, does that make the December 2023 release date less likely? Well, honestly, probably, since I would imagine if you're an in-demand star like your Chris Pines and your Zachary Quintos and your Carl Urbans and Simon Peggs, you might already be booked up through the rest of this year. And to meet that December 2023 release date, the film really has to start getting going in terms of filming this fall. So as with all things about Star Trek 4, we've said this a bunch before and we'll keep on saying it right up until the moment that the next Star Trek movie is released, maybe at some point within the next 2 to 3 years. Continue to take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Stephen, what was your reaction to the latest news about the cast of Star Trek 4?
After clearing my eyes from the tears of laughter, hearing that this was news to the actors as well, it occurred to me that this seems kind of on brand for Paramount. If you really dig into some of their history, and I've read books over the years about, Paramount, which used to be Desilu, and all of the bizarre sorts of ways that they were, just beginning this industry at the time, and the actions that they had taken. It seems kind of on brand for both Paramount and J.J. Abrams to just be sort of assuming that everyone was on board with them, just without actually reaching out to them. So I thought it was hysterical. I am not as happy with the Kelvin timeline as I could be. It's not bad, Star Trek by any stretch. It's definitely Star Trek, and it's enjoyable. It's just not... It feels a little too much like your average science fiction, franchise, which again is fine. I'll watch an average sci-fi franchise, but it's a little harder for me to get too excited about it, particularly since they seem to just have a habit of either rehashing stories that have already been told, Wrath of Khan, for example, or taking incredible actors and covering them in so much makeup and special effects that they don't, get the ability to shine through as a great villain like in the last one. So I'm not too excited about it, but I'll be in the audience watching if and when it ever comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope was coming out of the investors event last week that we were further along in the existence of Star Trek for this version of it than we had been on the previous version of it, the first version of it, which was supposed to have been directed by S.J. Clarkson. And that was announced, I think it was right around the point that Beyond came out. They were like, okay, yeah, Beyond's hitting theaters now. Oh, and by the way, there's going to be a fourth one and it's going to have Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth's coming back. That film was S.J. Clarkson had been hired as the director, shooting schedule was in place, and that's when the cast deals fell apart and they couldn't get it done. Well, we feel like right now we're basically back in exactly that same position. And well, Paramount weren't willing to pay what Chris Pine wanted in 2016. I guess it would have been 2017 at that point.
I imagine his number has only gone up since then.
Yeah, right. I mean, hopefully their pockets have gotten a lot deeper. But I mean, then the question is sort of begged, like, you know, why has it taken us so long to end up right back here at the start again? And of course, I think the expectation is this is not going to be the Chris Hemsworth story, that it's something else new entirely that Max Shackman has created, because they do talk in the Hollywood Reporter article about how the script's still being worked on and the budget isn't set yet. But like, this is not the switch flip moment, right? Where J.J. Abrams is like, okay, we're doing this movie and it's going to come out on this day and everything's now lined up to make sure that happens. This is just sort of like another step on this ultra long winding path towards the next Star Trek movie. And I have to say, I think if those cast deals aren't done yet and schedules are locked in for fall of this year, I just have a really tough time seeing how they meet a December 2023 release date, which means it's probably going to get pushed at the very least to 2024 summer, more likely 2024 Christmas time. So another year's delay. And then you're 8 years past your last Star Trek movie, which is a long break in between movies. And, I know they've said that, like, they've done market research and the market research indicates that people are still interested in seeing the Kelvin timeline cast. But is that still going to be true 2.5 to 3 years from now when they can finally figure this out? I mean, Hollywood, spend enough money, figure out whatever you want to. But I don't know. This is another not auspicious step along the path towards getting this Star Trek movie.
Right. And it's certainly been one that they've been telegraphing for a while. I mean, stepping through as many directors as they have for this next feature film and finally landing on one now. I mean, how, like you said, it's been years and we've dismissed, for example, Quentin Tarantino's, which I'm pleased about. I don't think I wanted to see his stamp on Star Trek, but this has been going on for so long. I think you're quite right. By the time they actually get to where they're working and producing it, they may just have to go with a different story entirely.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we'll have a Discovery movie at that point.
Well, Star Trek prodigy composer Nami Melamed has landed herself a second Star Trek show. She will be the episodic composer for Star Trek Strange New Worlds when it premieres in May, providing most of the show's music. The opening titles and closing theme will be composed by Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard composer Jeff Russo. For Nami Melamed's work on Prodigy, she has a similar arrangement. She does the episodic scores, and in that case, Michael Giacchino composed the series main title. Melamed announced the news on the Strange New Pod podcast, saying, quote, "I'm super, super excited. I can't wait for the show to come out. This is the Star Trek show that will make a lot of people happy and which will make me very happy. I'm just delighted. Everything is top notch. I can't wait for you guys to see it." Melamed's scores for Prodigy have been a real standout. Seriously, go load up the soundtrack on Spotify if you haven't yet and really enjoy the music that she created for that show. And I can't wait to hear what she has in store for us in Strange New Worlds. Stephen, what was your reaction to the news that Nami Melamed will be the primary composer for Star Trek Strange New Worlds?
Well, the whole Paramount group has just been batting a perfect score for me with the music that they've been able to put out over the past 10 years, really. Because like Jeff Russo, I have not been brought to tears repeatedly by the same theme every week on TV ever. But I had that experience with Picard. And so they've been doing so well. And when you told me about this, I went and did exactly as you suggested and listened to some of the Prodigy music and really focused on it. She's got some amazing skills there. I remember back in the Next Generation era at the All Good Things special that they released, I believe there was a bit where they went backstage with scoring an episode. And I remember being absolutely floored by how skilled these people are. They're watching this incredibly plain, action going on, and then some people in a room do some things and breathe through some devices, and then it turns that little scene into this epic thing. And it's just amazing how they're able to work with how the editor has put together the scene, and I can't wait. It's going to be amazing stuff. I know it.
Yeah, I'm really pumped for this. I think and obviously we haven't seen Strange New Worlds, so don't know exactly what it is yet. But in terms of that, like the thing that I really like about the Prodigy soundtrack and the music is it sounds very classically Star Trek, right? Jeff Russo has a very distinctive style which totally works within the Star Trek milieu, but is also just like, I think his style works better for those longer arc-based shows where, he can kind of like build themes over the course of 10 episodes that are maybe a bit more like elegiac, right? Like that's, the Picard kind of main title theme is very much that. Whereas I think for Strange New Worlds, which is supposed to be a bit more episodic, maybe a bit more fun in places, the kind of, I think a lot of that sort of Prodigy style where Nami Melaman kind of leans into some of that, more kind of, bombastic sort of Star Trek-y style. And certainly, the number of the tracks she did for the Moral Star Part 2, the mid-season finale.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would love to hear that kind of music in Strange New Worlds. I think it's going to vibe really well. And I think the other really interesting thing too is, one of the questions I was sort of talking, I can't remember if we were talking about this on last week's episode or the week before about Strange New Worlds, was this sort of question of like, well, how different is it ultimately going to feel from Star Trek Discovery? And I do think, having a different composer for the music for each of the episodes is really going to make that show feel like it's not just like a Discovery clone, that It does stand apart from it. And I think that's going to it'll be really exciting to see what does this authentically Star Trek show feel like on its own terms versus, as a sort of Discovery spin-off. So I'm really excited by this news and looking forward to seeing, I guess I'm looking forward to hearing how it sounds when it arrives.
Well, and I think another perfect way to look at this is the work that was done in the Short Treks episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just look at each of the Short Treks as its own individual thing, even though they're all very clearly Star Trek, they all feel very much different. And that long turbo lift interrogation is just, it could have been so much more boring if she hadn't given such an interesting play around in the music behind it.
And also terrific that the franchise is continuing to cultivate its homegrown talent, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Nami Melamed obviously has had a career prior to Star Trek, but I think this is her kind of really sort of big break into big television kind of production. Started off on one of the animated shows, has now clearly impressed them enough to migrate over to the one of the live action shows. You've also got people like Kirsten Beyer, who was a Star Trek novelist, had never written for TV before, then gets hired into the Discovery writers' room, then co-creates Star Trek Picard, now kind of splits time between those two shows. I mean, it's, that's one of the nice things about, this iteration of the franchise that is sort of continuing on from earlier versions of the franchise. Is like they're sort of making careers here for some of these people who are really, really talented. Star Trek grabs them, sees that talent, uses that talent, and then hopefully for those individuals, just in the same way that people like Ron Moore, Naren Shankur, Ira Stephen Bear, etc., Brandon Braga, have kind of, used that as a springboard for their own success, that some of this kind of current generation of people involved in the production will do the same.
I agree.
Well, last week saw the release of the first Star Trek audio drama in many years with Star Trek Picard No Man's Land by series co-creator Kirsten Beyer and frequent comics collaborator Mike Johnson. The audio drama, which focuses on Seven and Raffi between season 1 and 2 of Star Trek Picard, features a full cast, including Jerry Ryan returning to play Seven and Michelle Hurd returning to play Raffi. And speaking about the decision to center the story on Seven and Raffi, Kirsten Beyer, in an interview with comicbook.com, said, quote, "I think it felt like one of the areas that was left from season 1 and was going to be picked up on in season 2 that just felt like it had the most potential for further developing and deepening that relationship because it really began right at the end of season 1. And speaking about capturing the unique voice and atmosphere of Star Trek Picard, co-author Mike Johnson said, "I think we really are taking our cue from the tone, the performances of each series, depending on what we're writing. So Picard has its own particular tone distinct from even later TNG or the TNG movies that delve into Picard's psychology in a particular way." and on how to structure a story for the audio drama, which is a bit different than doing the audiobook. Bayer said, quote, "So when you're talking about a story that you're only going to be able to give an audience through their ears, you're looking for subjects that will allow for that kind of thing. If things have to be blowing up every 5 or 10 minutes in an audio drama, you're in trouble because it's very hard to convey that. We certainly built in kinds of action set pieces, but they had to come very organically from the struggles of the characters. And we knew that most of the time and energy we were going to be spending here is going to be spent with these two women trying to work out their issues." Stephen, did you get a chance to check out No Man's Land?
I have not had a chance yet, and I feel terrible about it because, as I mentioned last time, I'm in audiobooks, so it's right up my alley. But because I'm in audiobooks, it also makes it really hard to sit down and, for example, read a book or listen to an audiobook.
Sure.
But it is on my list because I recall, again, in the Ready Room preview for Picard, I recall Michelle Hurd mentioning that, that they didn't explore the relationship too much in the beginning of the series or of this season. And I recall hearing that this audio drama covers more of that. And I know there's some disagreement about whether or not it's canon since it's not on a screen, but I'm perfectly willing to use it as canon until, like I think Michael says in that interview you referenced that it's canon until it's not canon by something that's on screen.
Yeah.
So it is definitely something that I'm interested in reading more about, or rather enjoying, because audio dramas or radio dramas, how I used to know of them, were really, I love them. They're one of my favorite things. I have a Lord of the Rings radio drama from the BBC that I listen to regularly. And The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy I used to listen to regularly. Just some amazing, wonderful stuff. And it made me think of the War of the Worlds radio drama and all the fun reactions to that. But it's a medium that I think is welcome back through, I mean, it's such an easy step from podcast to radio drama that I'm very excited that hopefully this will encourage more, not just in Star Trek and not just in, authorized Star Trek, but perhaps branching out into, fan fictions and things like that. I would love to see more of that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, this one's really good. You're totally right. I think, at that final moment of Picard season 1 between Seven and Raffi, it could have gone in two directions, right? The direction they have gone in, which is around then building on that and exploring the relationship. And, we'll see how much they do of that once they get to Picard season 2. And then the other one, which Star Trek's done a lot of, which is sort of like winking at queer characters, but without ever kind of actually going there. I mean, Star Trek Discovery aside, of course, which obviously, has been forging a lot of really, new and great ground for the franchise in that. And, No Man's Land, definitely, it is about Seven and Raffi and their latent attraction for each other and whether they ultimately want to kind of explore that further and turn it into a relationship. I mean, there's a whole, obviously the story is about the sort of propulsive events that where the action comes in, has to do with a Romulan warlord who is voiced by Fred Tatasciore, Shax from Star Trek Lower Decks, who turns in a appropriately scenery-chewing performance. But the heart and soul of the audio drama is about that relationship between Seven and Raffi. And it would have been great as a novel, but it's even better as an audio drama when you can hear the lines actually read by Jerry Ryan and by Michelle Hurd. And, they certainly are not, I was reflecting on this. I was like, well, it's an audio drama, so she's not paid anywhere close to what they get paid for the regular TV show. You could probably see some of these actresses just like, well, just phoning it in, because, who's going to hear the audio drama? But they really do turn in really terrific and great performances. And so, yeah, I mean, it is like getting sort of an extra episode of Star Trek Picard. Just you can't watch it. You have to listen to it.
Well, all you've done is make me wish I could get to it more quickly.
And it's only 90 minutes long. So it is quite a manageable kind of length. It's not like the audiobooks where it's like 8 hours you have to give your time to. Well, and lastly this week, La La Land Records have announced the release of a new version of the Star Trek The Motion Picture soundtrack, this time tied into the upcoming release of the 4K version of the Star Trek Motion Picture Director's Edition. The soundtrack's 44 tracks run to 2.5 hours of running time and have been fully restored, remixed, and remastered from the first generation multi-track masters. And you might be wondering, hey, Didn't they release a mega 3 CD edition of the motion picture a few years ago? I think it was in 2012. Why would I get this one? Well, and you would be right in thinking this is partially just a way to keep the motion picture soundtrack in print, given the 3 CD version has been sold out for, I think, 2-3 years at this point. But there are some differences between the two releases that might convince you to double dip. The music has been rearranged slightly for the director's edition and is a new improvement upon the 2012 version of the soundtrack. It's probably the kind of thing that only the most audiophile of audiophile people are going to be interested in. But still, if you're interested in like the ultimate presentation of the soundtrack, you're probably going to find it here, even though the 2012 version has a whole 3rd CD and a bunch of extra stuff on it. And this one also starts with the longer version of Ailea's theme to mirror the director's edition. So if you're a real audio geek, as I say, head on over to TrekCore for more information about the audio quality differences between the two releases. But suffice to say, if you missed out on the 2012 TMP soundtrack, you now have another shot at a fabulous soundtrack collection for the iconic music for that movie. Stephen, are you a fan of the motion pictures music?
I am not just a fan of the motion pictures music, but I'm actually a huge fan of the movie itself. So
okay, nice.
I'm somewhat in the minority there, even in my family. But this does give me a reason. I've never owned the soundtrack, but one of my favorite scenes, and of course this is very much driven by the music because that's how that movie was, is when Spock is going into V'ger that very first time with the rocket boosting and everything. That music is so interesting and chaotic at times and cinematic at other times, and it's really exciting, and I don't spend enough time appreciating that, so I think I may have to actually pick this one up just because it's convenient now to do so.
Yeah, this is cool, and it sort of makes you wonder, hey, if this is supposed to be being released as a tie-in to the release of the motion picture director's edition in 4K, does that mean the release of the motion picture director's edition 4K is at some point in the maybe near future? I mean, I had sort of projected maybe that was more likely to come in the fall, but there have been a couple of like very, very light hints that people might just be reading completely the wrong way, that perhaps it's closer than some people think that it is. And hey, maybe this is another potential notch of evidence to say that, you know, it's not super, super far away, because otherwise, you know, maybe La La Land Records would have held it until the summer if it was coming in the fall or something like that. But it could just be a complete coincidence. But I'm a huge fan, as I've talked before, about the director's edition. Can't wait for that 4K version of it. Stephen, you say you're a fan of the movie. Have you seen the director's edition too?
I have not.
You're in for a treat.
I have an ancient, edition of it is the one that I have referred to my whole life. So I should probably upgrade that. And I don't think it's being streamed anywhere that I have access to at the moment. So I can't even go and catch the new version. So I have to, like I said, I'm very bad at procuring things.
I mean, at this point, you're just best off waiting for the new release when it comes. Yeah,
I think I will, yeah.
Because the current version of the director's edition, you can buy a streaming version of it on Amazon, but it's still the standard definition picture, so it's no better than watching the DVD in 2002.
Okay, well.
And there's a 4K version right around the corner, so I would say just hold on, and it'll be out on Paramount Plus, and so you don't even have to pay extra for it, and I think that's probably the best way to access it.
I think that's what I'll probably end up doing, and just have one of those weekends where I just consume all of my favorite stuff in brand new.
Very nice.
Once it gets onto the streaming, that is.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guest and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So, Stephen, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
I am still holding out hope, beyond all hope, and the little crumbs keep falling, here and there, but I'm still hoping for that Starfleet Academy show. That's what I want. I really, really, really want a Starfleet Academy show. It's never been done. I want it. I want it so badly.
Hey, it sounds like it's coming.
Well, it like you said before, when it comes from Paramount, don't believe it until you actually see it.
True.
So I'm waiting patiently, but I'm very eager. I really, really, really want it.
So I said in a previous episode that I thought there were potentially 3 time frames you could set the Starfleet Academy show in. One, in the Discovery time frame, far future, refounding Starfleet Academy style, right? That's obviously something they've spent a bit of time on this season, more in the earlier part of the season than now, but it's something that's been a feature in this season. 2, on the other side of the timeline, 23rd century, right? We've got Cadet Uhura in Strange New Worlds. You could potentially see some kind of 23rd century Starfleet Academy show or 3. And if you are avoiding Star Trek Picard details, skip ahead for 30 seconds. But obviously, we found out in that little preview for the Ready Room today, it looks like Elnor might be a cadet at Starfleet Academy in the beginning of this season. And so, like, you know, I had kind of pitched this idea, I think last year at some point, that could the Starfleet Academy show be the sort of successor to Star Trek Picard, in which maybe some of your younger characters like Elnor, potentially like Soji 2, you know, join Starfleet, and that's your Starfleet Academy. Okay, so of those 3, which do you think you might want and why?
Well, I would have to say, and maybe it's just because it's so fresh, but the Ready Room surprise of Elnor in Starfleet Academy has reignited my hope that it's right there, because it's even a very Star Trek story. If you're following the very first full Romulan in Starfleet, that's a great story all by itself, you know, so you've got plenty of things to build on, in addition to also there's all this stuff about Starfleet Academy that we don't know anything about. Like, why does Picard know so much about, you know, writings from judges? That's weird, but, you know, that... Putting that all aside, I think I would have to say that's a great idea to spin it off of Picard like that and just go right at that era.
Well, this kind of ties into my theory for this week, which is slightly different but connected, and it'll become clear why I say that in a second. So obviously we're now a little over a month, and I think we're about 6 weeks away from the start of Star Trek Mission Chicago, which is taking place April 8th to 10th in Chicago, Illinois. It is the new official Star Trek convention, the first official Star Trek convention since Creation's last pre-pandemic convention in 2019. And I think, you know, part of the sort of migration of the official license from Creation Entertainment to ReedPop, who are running the Star Trek mission conventions, with the first one being Mission Chicago in 6 weeks, is that, you know, they kind of want to use it as a bit more of a corporate springboard to do some stuff. And obviously last year, you know, we had First Contact Day, which was on April 5th, which is this big sort of, you know, streaming event, very similar to Star Trek Day, bunch of new announcements and trailers and stuff around different shows. And, you know, that was a really fun time. Well, I don't think we're going to do the sort of streaming First Contact Day thing again, just because, hey, that's April 5th and they have a big convention that they're trying to sell tickets for, April 8th to 10th. So I think the sort of First Contact Day experience is going to be rolled into Star Trek Mission Chicago. And I think this is the first time they're doing this. It's technically not the first time they're doing this. ReedPop did do a Star Trek Mission convention in New York for the 50th anniversary in 2016. They did that Star Trek Mission New York. That show was before they got it was an official show, but it was before they got the official license. But now they're the license holder, right? The expectation is that there's going to be official Star Trek conventions run by ReedPop, these Star Trek missions that will move probably around 3-4 places in the country, and it'll rotate every year. So I think for this first one coming up, you want to make an impression, right? You want to splash, you want something that sort of changes people's kind of attention away from the Las Vegas experience and what Creation is still offering, right? It's no longer official anymore. It's now the, you know, last year it was the 55-year mission. This year it's the 56-year mission. Next year, I'm sure imaginatively it'll be the 57-year mission. And so, and there's certainly been, right, like over the last kind of 2 months or so, I think a lot of fans have kind of been like, well, I'm not really sure what to expect from this ReedPop experience. Is clearly going to be very different from Creation Entertainment. I think there's maybe been a couple of missteps around. ReedPop has been very slow about announcing guests for this convention. We're 6 weeks out, and they're really only just starting to now kind of tick up the announcements. Today, they announced Alexander Siddig would be coming, which is great because he's not kind of a, you know, he goes infrequently to Creation events, but it's been a few years since he was last at a sort of dedicated Star Trek convention. So really cool to see him there. And meanwhile, Creation's been sort of pumping out guest announcements left, right, and center. And so I think a lot of people have been looking at that kind of difference and, you know, sort of saying, oh, well, Creation seems to have their stuff together and it's not clear that ReedPop necessarily do. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think they just do it differently. Seems like from other ReedPop events, they do sort of not announce the guests until much, much closer. And, you know, I think there's also an element of creation announces a bunch of guests and then cancels out a bunch of guests because they announced it 9 months ago and things changed and the guest wasn't able to come anymore. And they make people happy when they announce them and then they annoy them when they cancel them. And maybe Reed Pop's a bit more like, no, we're not going to announce them until we feel 100% certain that the guest is actually going to show up. Well, all of this is a long build up to say, I think that a Star Trek Mission Chicago, they need a big something to come out of the gate. And we've certainly had over the last few months, these sort of light teasers around, more shows, another show being worked on, the Starfleet Academy show, the Section 31 show, there's potential mysterious 8th series, which doesn't have a concept attached to it. We just know that from the way Alex Kurtzman's spoken several times over the last few years that when you account for the Starfleet Academy show and we account for the Section 31 show, when he talks about the kind of big picture of shows, that there's maybe one more out there that we do not yet have any information on. And so I think they want a Sir Patrick Stewart coming back to Star Trek level announcement for Star Trek Mission Chicago as a this is the convention you must come to going forward. And so my theory is, again, I could be completely wrong, but my theory is that one of these new shows, whether it's the Starfleet Academy show, the Section 31 show, or this mysterious other show, is going to get announced at Star Trek Mission Chicago this year and will be the kind of big splashy new thing on the block that will kind of cement the existence of these new mission conventions, and that people will make people want to come back because they will want that kind of experience of getting that reveal and getting that announcement from Star Trek Mission, which they're no longer going to get from the Creation Entertainment conventions. So Stephen, that's Starfleet Academy feels like the natural one to announce if they were going to do it. So I guess, hey, let me even, since it's a theory and it doesn't matter for anything, I'll make my theory even more specific. My theory is they're going to announce the Starfleet Academy show at Star Trek Mission Chicago. What do you think about that?
Well, that would be, I would certainly be happy about that. It'd be a good idea to consolidate the conventions into one, major focus. But if you're gonna announce one and there seems to be a missing one, gosh, what would that missing one be? That's the one that's got me.
Well, I mean, that's
Worf. That'd be a good one. That would be a big returning to Star Trek level response. He's already been in the most episodes.
That's the $64 million question: is what's that 8th show? Mike, if you push me and said, Alex, what do you think the 8th show is? I think it's a sequel show to Star Trek Picard, that Picard will wrap at the end of 3 seasons. Certainly from the way everybody's talking about them filming the series finale right now, it's just sounding more and more definitively, yes, that season 3 will be the end of Star Trek Picard. But I think there maybe going to be ideas or things they could do out of that maybe the showrunners want to do, and maybe that 8th series is sort of okay, yeah, we are ending Star Trek Picard at season 3, and Sir Patrick Stewart will sail off into retirement, but there will be another show that will kind of pick up some of the themes and the legacy of that show and kind of run with it.
Yeah, no, that would definitely that would make sense, actually, since by then also Discovery may not be around for the big epic storyline type things, so they may want to have a whole series just to have the large scale episodes. But again, I think Worf would be a great choice for that. Set it in Klingon territory. Hold off on showing us any Klingons for years and then just give us the entire series.
Hey, I'm all for it. Captain Worf, here we come.
Yeah, I'm there.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Stephen Van Doren, for joining me today. Stephen, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I'm on S. Van Doren at Twitter.
And you can find this show on Twitter at Weekly Trek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.